It wasn't when I stood on stage accepting Founder of the Year, or when I signed the term sheet valuing my company at $92 million. My family was silent through all of it. That changed only when my phone lit up with a single text from Dad demanding a family dinner at 7 p.m. I knew instantly they didn't want to congratulate me. They wanted to harvest, but they have no idea I've prepared a different chessboard. My name is Tatum Clark, and for the last 3 hours, I have been the loneliest person in a room filled with 2,000 people. The lights of the main stage were blinding, hot white beams that cut through the darkness of the auditorium, designed to make the dust motes dancing in the air look like glitter. I stood just behind the heavy velvet curtain, clutching a trophy that weighed nearly 5 pounds, its crystal facets biting into my palm. The applause was a physical force, a rolling thunder that vibrated against the floorboards beneath my heels. The master of ceremonies, a man whose voice I had heard on cable news for a decade, had just announced my name with the kind of reverence usually reserved for heads of state. He called me a visionary. He called Lumen Ledger a revolution in business-to-business financial transparency. He called me the Founder of the Year. I should have been soaring. I should have been weeping with joy. Instead, I was staring fixedly at the front row. Center left, there were 5 chairs there. They were the best seats in the house, draped in gold silk covers that marked them as VIP reserved seating. I had paid $4,000 for those seats. I had sent the tickets via overnight courier 2 weeks ago. I had confirmed the tracking numbers. I had sent a calendar invite. I had called 3 times. The chairs were empty. They were not just empty, they were conspicuously empty. In a sea of black tuxedos and designer evening gowns, that gap in the front row looked like missing teeth in a perfect smile. It was a void that screamed, while the rest of the room stood up to give me a standing ovation. That little pocket of silence sat there, judging me. My father, Randall, my mother, Claudine, my brothers, Trent and Bryce, even my Uncle Harlan, none of them had shown up. I walked out to the center of the stage, my smile fixed and practiced. I had learned a long time ago how to separate the muscles in my face from the feelings in my chest. I gave the speech I had written on the plane. I thanked my team. I thanked the early believers. I thanked the grit that keeps entrepreneurs awake at 4 a.m. I did not thank my family. I could not bring myself to look at the empty seats again, so I focused on the blinding spotlight at the back of the hall until my retinas burned. When I finally walked off stage, the noise of the world came rushing back in. My phone, which I had left with my assistant, was practically vibrating off the table. The news had broken while I was on stage. The embargo on our Series C funding round had lifted at exactly 8 o'clock. The headlines were already populating the feeds. Lumen Ledger secures funding at $92 million valuation. Tatum Clark, the new queen of fintech, from co-working space to 9 figures. My notification screen was a waterfall of congratulations. Venture capitalists I had not heard from in 3 years were suddenly sending me emails with subject lines like "just checking in" or "let us grab coffee." Former college classmates were sliding into my direct messages. My LinkedIn profile views had spiked by 6,000% in the last hour alone. I scrolled through the messages, my thumb moving rhythmically, looking for the only names that actually mattered. Nothing from Randall, nothing from Claudine, nothing from Trent. It was almost impressive how committed they were to the silence. It was not just that they had missed the event. They were actively ignoring the single biggest achievement of my life, a valuation of $92 million. It was a number so large it felt abstract. But to them, I knew it would be anything but abstract. To them, that number would look like blood in the water. Then, the phone buzzed with a different haptic pattern. A text message. It was from Dad. I stared at the screen, my heart doing a treacherous little flutter of hope against my ribs. Maybe they had a flat tire. Maybe there was a medical emergency. Maybe they were stuck in the lobby, arguing with security. I opened the message. Family dinner, 7 p.m. Important talk. That was it. No congratulations. No apology for missing the ceremony. No mention of the Forbes article that was currently trending on Twitter. Just a command. I read the text again. analyzing it the way I analyzed contracts. Randall Clark did not text like this. My father was a man who typed with his index fingers, used excessive ellipses, and could not spell to save his life. He used emojis like a teenager and always signed his texts with "Love, Dad," as if I did not know who the number belonged to. This text was grammatically perfect. It was concise. It was cold. It felt like a summons. I looked at the timestamp. It was sent 2 minutes after the valuation news hit the major wire services. The timing was surgical. A cold realization washed over me, cooling the sweat on my back. Randall had not written this, or if he had, someone was dictating it to him. The phrasing, "important talk," was specific. It implied gravity. It implied that I was in trouble, or that there was a crisis that superseded my little award. It was a power move designed to deflate my balloon before I could even enjoy the view. I signaled to the stage manager that I was leaving. I skipped the cocktail hour. I skipped the interviews with the tech blogs. I told them I had a family emergency, which was, in a twisted way, the truth. I made my way to the parking garage of the convention center. My usual car, a sleek, charcoal-gray German sports coupe that I had bought as a treat to myself last year, was parked in the VIP lot. It was a beautiful machine, a symbol of how far I had come from the days of eating instant noodles in a basement office. I walked right past it. Instead, I headed to the lower level, to the visitor parking where I had instructed my assistant to leave my old car. It was a 10-year-old sedan, the paint fading on the hood, the interior smelling faintly of stale coffee and old fabric. I kept it for exactly these occasions. I unlocked the door with the physical key, the mechanism stiff from disuse. Sliding into the driver's seat felt like putting on a costume. The suspension squeaked as I settled in. This was the car of Tatum the struggler. This was the car of the daughter who was always asking for advice, the girl who was just going through a phase with her little startup. If I showed up in the sports coupe, wearing my $4,000 gown, I would be Tatum the CEO. I would be a threat. I would be someone they needed to take down a peg. But if I showed up in this rust bucket, looking exhausted and compliant, I might just catch them off guard. I started the engine. It rattled and coughed before turning over. I pulled out of the garage and merged onto the highway, heading south toward Richmond. The drive was quiet, save for the hum of tires on asphalt. The Virginia landscape outside was swallowed by the night, just blurred shapes of trees and exit signs. I had an hour to think, an hour to let the anger simmer down into something useful, something cold and hard like steel. Why now? The questions cycled through my mind. They had missed my college graduation because Trent had a baseball game. They had missed the launch of my first product because Bryce had a crisis with his girlfriend. They had missed the day I signed my first Fortune 500 client because Randall and Claudine were on a cruise they could barely afford. For years, I told myself they were just busy. I told myself that they did not understand the tech world, that my achievements were too abstract for them to grasp. But $92 million was not abstract. A Forbes headline was not abstract. If they were proud, they would have called. If they were happy for me, they would have been in those front row seats, waving to the cameras, taking credit for my genes. But they were not there. And yet, the moment the money became real, the moment the valuation was public record, they summoned me. They did not want to celebrate. They wanted to collect. I thought about the family business, Vaughn Heritage Lodging. It was a chain of mid-range motels that Randall had inherited from his father and slowly run into the ground over the last 30 years. I knew things were tight. I knew they had leveraged the properties to the hilt, but I had stayed out of it, respecting the boundary they had drawn. Business was for the men of the family. Randall had told me once, "You just focus on your computer games." Honey, now, the computer games were worth more than their entire portfolio combined. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The text message had mentioned a family dinner. That meant everyone would be there. Trent, with his condescending advice about real estate, Bryce, with his get-rich-quick schemes and his camera constantly recording for his 3,000 followers, and Harlan Reese. If the text felt scripted, it was Harlan's script. He was my mother's brother, a man who called himself a business consultant, but was really just a predator in a polyester suit. He was the one who whispered in Randall's ear. He was the one who always knew how to spin a failure into a victim narrative. If Harlan was there, this was not a dinner, it was an ambush. I reached for my phone, which was mounted on the dashboard. I did not call my parents. I did not call my friends. I opened the encrypted messaging app I used for high-level corporate communication. I found the contact for Sloan Mercer, my chief operating officer. Sloan was more than an employee. She was the architect of my sanity. She was the one who knew where the bodies were buried because she had helped me dig the holes. I tapped the microphone icon and spoke clearly, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt in my hands. Sloan, I am activating the mirror protocol. I need a full financial workup on the Clark family assets by tomorrow morning. Pull everything, public records, liens, court filings. Use the private investigator we retain for due diligence. I paused, watching the headlights of an oncoming truck sweep across my windshield. I am heading into a meeting with them now. They think they are summoning a daughter. I need you to prepare the legal team. Iris Bell needs to be on standby. If my instincts are right, by 9 o'clock tonight, I am going to be asked for a check. I need to know exactly what hole that money is going into before I even consider opening my checkbook. I sent the voice note. Then I typed a quick follow-up text. Tonight they are going to lie to me. I am going to let them talk until they run out of breath. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The screen glowed for a moment before fading to black. I saw the exit sign for the country club where my parents held their memberships. A membership they clung to as a status symbol, even when they were late on the mortgage. It was a place of old money and polite conversation. A place where people smiled while stabbing you in the back with a silver fork. Perfect. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wiped the confident founder of the year gloss from my lips. I pulled a few strands of hair loose from my bun to look frazzled. I slumped my shoulders slightly. I was not Tatum Clark, CEO of Lumen Ledger, driving into a negotiation. I was just Tatum, the daughter who had finally come home when called. I turned the blinker on. The rhythmic clicking sounded like a countdown. Let the game begin. The tires of my decade-old sedan hummed a low, monotonous drone against the asphalt, a sound that vibrated straight up through the floorboards and into my bones. It was the soundtrack of my 20s, a noise I associated with anxiety, unpaid bills, and the desperate hope that the check engine light would not flicker on. Driving this car was like stepping into a time machine, transporting me back to a version of myself I thought I had buried under layers of competence and capital. But tonight, that regression was necessary. I needed to remember exactly who they thought I was, so I could play the role convincingly. As the miles between the convention center and Richmond disappeared, my mind replayed a highlight reel of their absence. Tonight's empty seats were not an anomaly, they were a tradition. I thought about my college graduation. I had graduated summa cum laude, top of my class in economics. I stood on the lawn in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for parents who had promised to be there. They never showed. Randall and Claudine had gone to a networking brunch for the Regional Hotel Association instead. My mother later told me that it was a crucial opportunity to secure a vendor contract for the motel linens, as if discounted bedsheets weighed the same on the scale of life as her daughter's academic peak. They sent a card 2 weeks late with a $50 bill inside, the kind of gesture you make to a distant niece, not a daughter who just cracked the ceiling of her potential. Then there was the day I signed my first real contract. It was not a massive deal, just a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio that needed to clean up their supply chain invoicing, but it proved that Lumen Ledger was not just a hallucination, it was a 5-figure contract. I had called home, breathless, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Randall had picked up the phone, distracted, the sound of a golf game blaring on the television in the background. When I told him the news, he did not ask about the technology. He did not ask about the margin. He asked if the money was real. I remember his voice, thick with a patronizing chuckle. He asked me if it was internet money or if I could actually buy groceries with it. He told me that until I was dealing with bricks and mortar, I was just playing a video game. To Randall Clark, value was only real if you could kick it with your boot. If it lived on a server, it was a fantasy. He called my entire industry a cloud numbers game, a phrase he used with the same disdain one might use for a pyramid scheme. Claudine was softer but infinitely more damaging. She treated my ambition like a prolonged adolescence. For 3 years, she referred to my startup as my phase. She would ask me at Thanksgiving if I was almost done with my little computer project and ready to find a nice corporate job in human resources. Something steady, something that would not interfere with finding a husband. In her world, a woman's career was a placeholder until marriage, and my stubborn insistence on building an empire was just a refusal to grow up. And then there were my brothers, Trent, the eldest, the heir apparent, the golden boy who could do no wrong even as he made mediocre decision after mediocre decision within the family business. Trent looked at my work and saw only luck. He told me to my face once that I had just stumbled onto a trend. He said the market was a bubble and I was just floating on the surface scum. He worked in the physical world of property management, dealing with plumbing leaks and zoning permits, and he wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor. To him, my work was invisible. Therefore, it was effortless. If I succeeded, it was chance. If he succeeded, it was destiny. Bryce was the opposite but equally exhausting. My younger brother, the self-proclaimed entrepreneur who had never actually incorporated a business. Bryce lived his life in 15-second clips. He bought courses on dropshipping, on crypto trading, on flipping sneakers. He spoke in hashtags. To Bryce, I was not a CEO, I was content. He constantly asked to film in my office, not to learn how I built the company, but to use the backdrop to sell his own image of success. He wanted the aesthetic of the grind without the grit. When I told him no, he called me a gatekeeper. The memory that stung the most, however, was not an absence, but a presence. It was 5 years ago. I had just finished the beta version of the software. I had a potential lead on a developer who was willing to work for equity, but I needed a physical space. I could not work out of my apartment anymore. The zoning was strict, and I needed a professional address to be taken seriously by enterprise clients. I found a tiny, windowless office in a shared building. The deposit was $5,000. I went to my father. I sat at the heavy oak dining table, the same table we would likely be sitting at tonight, and I laid out my business plan. I showed him the projections. I showed him the market analysis. I asked for a loan. With interest, I offered to sign a promissory note. Randall did not even flip the page of the prospectus. He looked at me over the rim of his reading glasses and delivered a line he probably thought was profound. He told me that struggle builds character. He said that if he gave me the money, he would be robbing me of the hunger I needed to succeed. He framed his stinginess as a lesson in virtue. 2 weeks later, he bought a new fishing boat for $25,000. He named it The Legacy. That rejection was the fuel that burned in my engine for half a decade. I did not get the office. Instead, I moved into a cheap co-working space downtown, a place that smelled of stale popcorn and ozone, where the internet cut out every time it rained. I sat on a wobbly plastic chair for 18 hours a day. I wrote the code. I answered the customer support emails at 3 a.m, pretending to be a man named Steve because I learned that male IT support agents got yelled at less than female ones. I fixed bugs while weeping from exhaustion. I ate vending machine crackers for dinner 3 nights a week. I built Lumen Ledger not with family money, but with the scraps I could scavenge. I built it in the dark, in the silence, while they were on vacations I was not invited to. And the funny thing was, as the company started to grow, their attitude shifted. But it did not shift to pride. It shifted to suspicion. When I started missing Sunday dinners because I was flying to San Francisco or New York to pitch to investors, they did not ask how the pitch went. They asked what I was doing that was so important. They asked it with a sneer, as if I were lying. They implied that I was using work as an excuse to avoid them, or worse, that I was involved in something shady. How can you be busy all the time, Claudine would ask. You just sit at a computer. They could not comprehend the scale of what I was building because they had never built anything from scratch. They had only maintained what was given to them. I learned a valuable lesson during those years. I learned that they preferred me when I was struggling. When I came home with dark circles under my eyes, complaining about a difficult client or a cash flow crunch, the tension in the room dissipated. They relaxed. They became solicitous. Randall would offer me advice from the 1980s that was completely irrelevant to modern SaaS business, and he would beam while doing it. Claudine would pack me leftovers. Trent would clap me on the shoulder and tell me to hang in there. They liked me when I was small. They liked me when I was losing. My failure validated their mediocrity. If the smart one, the ambitious one, was struggling, then their own stagnation was not their fault. It was just the way the world worked. But the moment I showed strength, the moment I showed independence, the walls went up. So, I gave them what they wanted. I learned to curate my life for their consumption. I stopped talking about the wins. I stopped mentioning the revenue milestones. When I bought my luxury apartment, I told them I was renting it at a discount from a friend. When I bought my sports car, I never drove it to Richmond. I kept the old sedan. I kept the narrative of the struggling daughter alive because it was the only currency they accepted. And tonight, that narrative was my armor. I saw the stone pillars of the Richmond Country Club looming in my headlights. The entrance was grand, flanked by manicured hedges that were trimmed with obsessive precision. It was a place that smelled of old money and desperate attempts to keep up appearances. The Clark family had held a membership here for 40 years, a line item on their expense report that they refused to cut even when the motel chain was bleeding cash. It was their stage, the place where they performed the role of the successful local dynasty. I slowed the car down, letting the engine sputter slightly as I turned into the long, winding driveway. The gravel crunched beneath my tires. Ahead, under the portico, I could see the valet stand. A line of pristine luxury SUVs and European sedans sat waiting. I pulled my rust bucket right up to the front. The young valet stepped forward, his uniform crisp and white. As he got closer, his professional smile faltered. He took in the faded paint on the hood, the scratch along the passenger door, the dull rims. I could see the confusion in his eyes. He checked his clipboard, wondering if I was a delivery driver or lost help. I rolled down the window. The glass squeaked in protest. "Reservation for Clark," I said, my voice flat. The valet recovered quickly, trained to be polite, even to the help. "Of course, ma'am." I stepped out of the car. The contrast was delicious. I was wearing a simple blouse and slacks that I kept in the trunk for emergencies, generic, unthreatening, slightly wrinkled. I had swapped out my diamond studs for simple gold knots. I had wiped off the bold red lipstick I wore on stage and left my face bare, letting the fatigue of the last 24 hours show plainly on my skin. I handed him the key, the single, unadorned metal key on a plastic ring. "Be careful with the transmission," I told him, pitching my voice loud enough for the couple walking in behind me to hear. "It sticks in reverse." The valet held the key like it was a contaminated object. "I will take good care of it, ma'am." I walked up the steps to the heavy wooden doors of the club. My heart was not racing. My palms were not sweating. A strange calm had settled over me. This was not a homecoming. It was an undercover operation. Inside those doors, my family was waiting. They had their script prepared. They had their roles assigned. Randall the patriarch, Claudine the concerned mother, Trent the skeptic, Bryce the hype man, and Uncle Harlan the shark. They were expecting Tatum the daughter, the one who sought their approval, the one who could be bullied into submission. They were expecting the girl who asked for $5,000 and was told no. They had no idea that the woman walking through the door could buy this entire building with a signature. They had no idea that I had already instructed my COO to dismantle their financial secrets piece by piece. I paused at the threshold, taking a deep breath of the air-conditioned air, scented with lilies and floor wax. I rolled my shoulders forward, slouching just a fraction of an inch. I let my eyes lose their focus, adopting the 1,000-yard stare of someone who is overwhelmed by life. I was ready. I pushed the door open and stepped onto their stage, ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The maitre d' held the door to the Commonwealth room open with a practiced reverence that I knew my father paid extra for. This was the private dining suite at the back of the club, a space reserved for anniversary parties, retirement toasts, and apparently, shakedowns. I stepped inside, and the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing the room like a vault. The family was already seated. They had chosen the round table near the fireplace. Though the fire remained unlit, despite the chill in the air, the room smelled of aged leather and the potpourri that Claudine insisted made a house feel like a home. I paused, letting my eyes sweep the arrangement. The psychology of the room had been curated with surgical precision. Randall sat at the 12 o'clock position, facing the door, the patriarch on his throne. To his right sat Harlan Reese, my uncle, leaning back with a glass of dark liquor in his hand. To Randall's left was Claudine, and beside her, Trent. Bryce was slouched next to Trent. That left one chair for me. It was placed directly opposite Randall, at the 6 o'clock position. But it was not set in alignment with the others. It was pulled back about 6 inches from the table's edge, creating a subtle, physical distance. It was not a seat at the family table. It was the witness stand. It was the seat of a guest who had been invited to observe, not to participate. I walked toward them, my heels sinking into the thick Persian rug. I kept my shoulders slumped, my expression wavering between fatigue and gratitude. Tatum Randall boomed. He stood up, his napkin falling to the floor unheeded. He crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides, arms wide open. He wore a navy blazer with gold buttons, the kind that looked nautical but had never seen the deck of a ship. He pulled me into a hug that knocked the wind out of me. It was a performance. His arms squeezed too tight, a display of dominance disguised as affection. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath and the faint, metallic scent of nervous sweat beneath his cologne. "We were so worried you wouldn't make it," he said, releasing me but keeping his heavy hands on my shoulders. He looked me up and down, his eyes scanning for cracks. I forced a weak smile. The traffic was bad. "Dad, I came as soon as I got your text." Claudine did not stand. She remained seated, her hands clasped around a glass of white wine. As I approached the table, she offered her cheek for a kiss. Her skin was powdery and cold. "You look tired." "Tatum," she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could hear. Her eyes raked over my face, lingering on the lack of makeup and the loose strands of hair I had strategically pulled free. "You look absolutely drained. Are you eating? You know how you get when you are stressed. You waste away." It was a classic Claudine opening move. Concern weaponized as criticism. By focusing on my physical state, she was establishing that I was fragile, that I was not taking care of myself, and therefore, I needed their guidance. "I am fine, Mom," I said, taking my seat. "Just a long week." Trent snorted, reaching for a bread roll. He did not look at me. He was busy buttering the bread with aggressive, stabbing motions. "A long week," he echoed, his tone dripping with the condescension of an older brother who believes birth order equals merit. "Try managing 3 properties during a storm season. That is a long week. Real work does not happen in air conditioning." "Tate," I let the insult land without flinching. In the past, I would have argued. I would have explained that managing a team of 200 engineers and navigating a Series C funding round was actually quite demanding. Tonight, I just nodded. "You are right. Trent," I said softly. "I do not know how you do it." Trent preened, the compliment feeding his ego like a treat to a dog. He leaned back, chewing with his mouth slightly open. "It is about legacy, Tate, building something that stands on the earth. Digital stuff, it is just vapor. Dad and we are building an empire of dirt and brick. That is what lasts." I looked at Bryce. My younger brother was the only one not looking at me. He was scrolling through his phone, the blue light illuminating his face. He seemed bored, disconnected, until his thumb paused. He swiped up, then looked at me, then back at the phone. His eyes widened. "Holy smokes," he said, the slang sounding jarring in the quiet room. He turned the phone screen toward the table. It was the Forbes article. My face. professionally lit and retouched, stared back at us under the headline about the $92 million valuation. "Is this real?" Bryce asked, his voice cracking slightly. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and calculation. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, converting my valuation into potential views for his channel. "You are actually worth $92 million. Like, liquid." The table went silent. The number hung in the air, heavy and electric. "It is a valuation, Bryce," I said, keeping my voice dismissive. "It is paper money. It is not like I have that in my bank account. It is just business math." Randall cleared his throat. A loud, rumbling sound meant to regain control of the room. He waved a hand at Bryce, signaling him to put the phone away. We know," Randall said, his voice smooth, benevolent. "We saw the news. Honey, that is actually why we wanted to get everyone together." He paused, looking around the table, ensuring he had everyone's attention. "We are so proud of you, Tatum," he said. The words felt slimy, proud. I looked at the empty chair next to me, the ghost of where they should have been 3 hours ago. If they were proud, they would have been in the auditorium. If they were proud, they would have sent flowers. If they were proud, they would have called me to say congratulations instead of summoning me here like a delinquent teenager. "Thank you," I said, looking down at my empty plate. "We always knew you had it in you," Claudine added, her voice syrupy. "Even when you were playing with those little computers in the basement, we knew you were special. Family is always here for you. Tatum, always." They were laying the foundation. They were rewriting history in real time, painting themselves as the supportive bedrock of my success rather than the obstacles I had to climb over. They were not mentioning their absence at the award ceremony. To mention it would be to admit fault. Instead, they were acting as if this dinner was the celebration. The door opened, and a waiter entered with the appetizers, shrimp cocktails, and stuffed mushrooms. The interruption was brief, but it allowed the tension to ratchet up another notch. Harlan Reese had not spoken yet. He sat watching me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Harlan was the danger in the room. Randall was bluster. Trent was arrogance. Claudine was guilt. But Harlan was leverage. He waited until the waiter left before he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. He did not smile. "Let us not beat around the bush. Randall," Harlan said. His voice was gravel, worn down by years of cigarettes and backroom deals. "Tatum is a busy woman. She runs a major corporation now. We should respect her time." I looked at Harlan. He was the only one treating me like a peer, which meant he was the one holding the knife. "Thank you, Uncle Harlan," I said. Harlan nodded. "We are here to talk about collaboration. Tatum, synergy. The Clark family has assets. You have momentum. It is time we aligned those things." Randall took the cue. He sat up straighter, puffing out his chest. He looked like a man about to deliver a rehearsed speech. "Exactly," Randall said. "You see, honey, Vaughn Heritage Lodging is at a pivot point. We have been looking at the market. We have been analyzing the trends. The old model well. It is steady, but we want to grow. We want to modernize." He looked at Trent, who nodded solemnly. "We are looking to rebrand," Trent said, reciting lines that sounded like they came from a brochure. "Elevate the guest experience. Tech-forward amenities. We want to position ourselves as a boutique experience for the modern traveler." I kept my face blank. I knew Vaughn Heritage Lodging. It was a collection of 6 roadside motels with fading carpets and plumbing that screamed when you turned the tap. To turn them into a boutique experience would require bulldozing them and starting over. "That sounds ambitious," I said neutrally. "It is," Randall said, his eyes gleaming. "It is visionary, but vision requires capital. Banks well. You know how banks are right now. Tight, unimaginative. They do not see the family history. They just look at the last quarter's spreadsheet." He laughed, a nervous, barking sound. "We have a liquidity gap," he said. "Just a small bridge to get us from here to the renovation phase. Once the new branding launches, the revenue will triple. Conservatively." He paused. He picked up his water glass, took a sip, and put it down. He was stalling. He was building up the courage to say the number. I stayed silent. I did not help him. I did not ask how much. I just waited. "We need $1.8 million, Randall said. He said it quickly, blurring the numbers together. 1.8, as if saying it fast made the amount smaller. He looked at me, his eyes wide, pleading, but with an undercurrent of entitlement. "It is a bridge loan. Tatum, strictly business. We would pay you back with interest. Better interest than you would get in a savings account. We keep it in the family. We win. You win. $1.8 million. It was an oddly specific number. It wasn't around $2 million for growth. It was 1.8. That smelled of debt consolidation. That smelled of a balloon payment coming due on a loan they had already defaulted on. I looked around the table. Claudine was studying her napkin. Trent was staring at the ceiling, pretending to be bored. Bryce was looking at me, waiting to see if the ATM would dispense cash. They thought this was the moment. They thought I would flush with pride at being asked to save the family empire. They thought I would pull out my checkbook to buy their approval, to finally secure that seat at the table that they had denied me for so long. I took a slow breath. I reached for my water glass and took a sip. The water was lukewarm. I set the glass down with a soft clink. "That is an interesting proposition," I said. My voice was calm, professional. It lacked the familial warmth they were projecting. Randall smiled, relief washing over his face prematurely. "I knew you would see the vision. Honey," I told Harlan, "she has the eye. She knows a good deal." I did not smile back. "However," I continued, my voice hardening just a fraction, "if we are discussing an investment of that magnitude, I need to do my due diligence." The smile on Randall's face faltered. Due diligence. I nodded. "I cannot authorize a capital deployment of nearly $2 million without a full audit. I need to see the books. Dad, I need the P&L statements for the last 5 years. I need the current rent rolls. I need to see the debt schedule and any outstanding liens on the properties." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The fake warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp tension. Trent scoffed. "Jesus, Tate, it is not an audit. It is a family loan. You think we are going to stiff you?" "It is not about trust, Trent," I lied. "It is about fiduciary responsibility. If I am the investor, I need to know the health of the asset." Claudine looked up, her eyes narrowing. "We are not a stranger. Tatum, we are your parents. You do not need to check our paperwork like we are some criminals." I turned to Harlan. He had not moved. He was watching me with a look of dawning realization. He knew. He was the only one who realized the game had changed. "Uncle Harlan," I said, "you are a businessman. You understand. If you were putting $2 million into a venture, you would want to see the financials, right?" Harlan placed his hands flat on the table. His fingers were thick, the nails manicured. "This is not Wall Street, Tatum," Harlan said, his voice low and dangerous. "We do not do that here. This is a private matter. The family does not open its books to scrutiny. We operate on trust. If you are part of this family, you trust your father." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "Family does not ask for receipts," he said. It was a challenge. It was a line in the sand. He was telling me to get back in my box. He was telling me that my money was welcome, but my brain was not. I looked at Randall. He looked angry now, his face flushing a mottled red. He felt humiliated that I had asked. He felt insulted that I, the daughter, the one who played with computers, dared to question his business acumen. I realized then that they had never intended to treat me as a partner. They just wanted a silent backer. They wanted my money to fill the hole they had dug, but they wanted me to stay blind to how deep that hole really was. I reached down and picked up my purse. I did not stand up yet. I just shifted my weight. "Preparing. I understand," I said. Randall let out a breath. Good. I knew you were just acting tough. "So, we can have the papers drawn up by Monday." I looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said. Randall froze. What I understand that you operate on trust, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. But I do not. I operate on data. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. A harsh, jarring sound. You asked me for money to fix a business, I said, looking at each of them in turn. But you will not show me the business. That tells me the business is not broken. It tells me the business is dead, and you are just looking for someone to pay for the funeral. Tatum. Claudine shrieked, half standing. How dare you sit down? Claudine. Harlan snapped. He was still looking at me. You are making a mistake. Girl. Harlan said. You are walking away from your family. I smoothed the front of my slacks. I looked at the empty VIP seats in my mind. I looked at the text message that had summoned me here. I did not come here to walk away. I said, I came here to help, but I cannot help a lie. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. If you want the money, I need the truth. I need to see exactly where the rod is. Harlan sneered. We will never show you those books. I smiled then. It was the first real smile I had worn all night. It was sharp and cold. Then I guessed tonight was a waste of a reservation. I said, I turned to leave, but stopped and looked back over my shoulder. I came here to see what the family planned to do with the truth. I said, now I know. You plan to bury it. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Randall sputtering, heard Trent cursing, but I also heard the silence of Harlan Reese. He was the only one who realized that I had not just said no, I had just declared war. The silence in the sedan was different on the drive back to the city, on the way there. It had been the silence of anticipation, the nervous hum of a soldier checking their gear before a drop. Now, it was the silence of a crime scene. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was replaying the last 10 minutes in the private dining room on a loop, slowing it down, analyzing it frame by frame like security footage. I was looking for the tells. In my line of work, you learn that people lie with their mouths, but they tell the truth with their bodies. When I had asked to see the books, the reaction had been instantaneous and synchronized. Randall had not looked at Claudine, his wife of 40 years. He had not looked at Trent, his heir apparent. His eyes had darted instantly, reflexively, to Harlan Reese. It was a micro-expression, lasting less than a second, but it screamed volume. It was the look of a frightened employee checking with the boss to see if he was in trouble. It told me that Randall Clark was not the CEO of this family operation anymore. He was just the face. Harlan held the leash. Then there was Trent, my brother, who usually carried himself with unearned swagger, had coughed. It was a fake, jagged sound, the kind of noise a man makes when his throat suddenly goes dry from adrenaline. He had reached for his water glass, and I had seen the tremor in his hand. Trent knew. He knew the numbers were bad. And Claudine, that was the one that made my stomach turn. When the tension had spiked, she had reached out and squeezed my forearm. At the time, it might have looked like a motherly gesture, a plea for peace, but I felt the grip. Her nails had dug into my skin. It was not a caress. It was a restraint. She was trying to physically suppress me, to squeeze the obedience back into my veins. They were terrified. I pulled into the parking garage of my office building at 11 o'clock at night. I did not go home. I could not go home. My apartment was full of soft furniture and silence, and I needed hard surfaces and data. I needed the war room. I walked into the Lumen Ledger headquarters. The open plan office was dark, save for the green glow of the server status monitors and the light spilling from the conference room where Sloan was waiting. Sloan Mercer was sitting at the head of the long glass table, surrounded by stacks of paper and 3 laptops. She looked up as I entered. She did not ask how the dinner went. She took one look at my face and slid a cup of black coffee across the table. The mirror protocol is active, Sloan said. Her voice was calm. The anchor I needed. I woke up Iris. She is on video link. I looked at the large screen on the wall. Iris Bell, my general counsel, was sitting in her home office, looking impeccably sharp despite the hour. Iris was the kind of lawyer who regarded emotions as inefficiencies in the system. "Tell me what they asked for," Iris said, skipping the pleasantries. $1.8 million, I said, dropping my purse onto a chair. "They called it bridge money for a rebranding. They claimed they want to pivot to a boutique model." Iris let out a short, sharp breath that was almost a laugh. $1.8 million, that is not a pivot. Tatum, that is a bailout. You do not ask for a bridge loan of that specific size unless you have a balloon payment coming due or a judgment against you. I nodded, pacing the length of the room. Randall refused to show me the books. Harlan shut it down immediately. He said the family operates on trust. "Trust is not a line item on a balance sheet," Iris said. "If they are hiding the ledger is not just bad, it is incriminating." I stopped pacing. I remembered something. It was a memory from 3 months ago, a fragment I had discarded because I was too busy closing the Series C round. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my archived messages. I found it. A text from a woman named Sarah, a receptionist at the flagship Vaughn Heritage Motel in Richmond. She had messaged me on Facebook, a tentative, apologetic note. "Hi, Tatum. I know you are busy and big time now, but I didn't know who else to ask. Dad, meaning Randall, hasn't signed the payroll checks for the last 2 cycles. He says it is a bank glitch. I am 2 weeks behind on rent. Do you know if it is going to be fixed soon?" I had sent her $500 via Venmo out of my own pocket and told her I would check on it. I never did. I had been focused on my own survival, and I had let myself believe Randall's lie about a bank glitch. I read the text out loud to the room. "Wage theft," Iris said flatly. "That is a federal offense. If they are missing payroll, they are insolvent. That $1.8 million is not for renovations. It is to keep the labor board from padlocking the doors." I turned to Sloan. "Get Noah on the line. I need to know what the street knows." Noah Klein was our financial advisor, a former investment banker who had left Wall Street because he developed a conscience. But he kept his contacts. He answered on the second ring. "Tatum," Noah said. The background noise sounded like a busy bar. "I was about to call you. I heard some chatter tonight that you might not like." "Tell me," I said. "There is a debt package circulating in the secondary market," Noah said. "Distressed commercial real estate assets in Virginia. High risk, high yield. The underlying assets are 6 motels operating under the Vaughn Heritage brand." My blood ran cold. The secondary market was where bad debt went to die. It was where vultures circled. "Who is selling it?" I asked. "A regional bank in Richmond," Noah replied. "They are looking to offload the paper for 60 cents on the dollar. That means the bank has zero confidence in the borrower's ability to repay. They just want to salvage what they can before a bankruptcy filing." I did the math in my head. If the bank was selling the debt, Randall had likely been in default for months. "Is there a buyer?" I asked. "Not yet," Noah said. "But the shark in the water is that the broker selling the debt is using your name." I froze. "Explain." "The pitch deck for the debt sale mentions that the borrower has, and I quote, significant familial liquidity events pending. They are telling potential buyers that the founder of the year is going to underwrite the risk. They are using your Forbes cover to keep the creditors from foreclosing." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, followed immediately by a white-hot rage. They were not just asking me for money. They had already spent my reputation. They were trading on my name without my consent, using my success as a shield to protect their incompetence. "Send me the listing." "Noah," I said. I hung up and looked at the screen. Iris was typing furiously. "I am pulling the public records now," Iris said. "It is worse than we thought." "Tatum." She cast her screen to the main monitor. It was a cascade of red flags. Item 1. Iris narrated, 3 outstanding mechanics liens filed in the last 6 months, a roofing company, a plumbing contractor, and an industrial laundry service. Total value, $240,000. Item 2. She continued. Citation from the Virginia Department of Health. Mold violations in the east wing of the Richmond property. They were fined $12,000. The fine is unpaid. Status is delinquent. Item 3. And this is the kicker. A lawsuit filed 4 weeks ago by a vendor for breach of contract. I stepped closer to the screen. The numbers blurred into a portrait of absolute negligence. This was not a business struggling with market shifts. This was a carcass being picked clean. Randall and Trent had been bleeding these motels dry, likely to fund their country club dues and the appearance of success, while the actual infrastructure rotted around them. I need to talk to one of these lien holders. I said, find me the contact for the roofing company. Sloan tapped a few keys. Miller Roofing. Owner is a guy named Davis Miller. Mobile number is listed in the filing. I dialed the number. It was late, but small business owners never sleep when they are owed money. Hello? The voice was gruff, suspicious. Mr. Miller, this is Tatum Clark. I said. There was a long pause, then a harsh, bitter laugh. The daughter. Miller said, well, isn't that precious? Your daddy finally decided to stop screening my calls. Or are you calling to tell me another story about a wire transfer getting stuck in the cloud? I am not calling for my father. I said, I am calling to find out the truth. How much does he owe you? $85,000. Miller spat. For a full tear-off and replace on the north building. He told me to go ahead and do the work on credit. He looked me in the eye and shook my hand. Why did you take the job on credit? I asked. The Clark reputation for payment was not exactly stellar. Because he told me about you, Miller said. He told me his daughter was building some big tech company. He said you were about to cash out and that you were going to refinance the whole family operation. He showed me a magazine clipping. Lady, he said, my girl is good for it. She is just waiting on the lawyers to sign the papers. I closed my eyes. The humiliation was physical. Randall had been promising my money to strangers before I had even earned it. I was not a person to him. I was a future asset. I was an ATM that he was just waiting to punch the code into. He lied to you. Mr. Miller. I said quietly, I never agreed to that. The line went silent. Then Miller sighed. A heavy, tired sound. I figured, look, lady, I have got guys to pay. I am filing for a judgment on Monday. I am going to put a lock on the place. Don't. I said, not yet. Why should I wait? Because if you foreclose now, you get in line behind the bank, the tax man, and the lawyers. I said, my voice shifting into negotiation mode. You will get pennies. Give me 48 hours. I am going to fix the capitalization structure. If I step in, you get paid in full. You serious? Miller asked. I do not write checks that bounce, Mr. Miller. Unlike my father, I ended the call. The room was silent. Sloan and Iris were watching me. They used you. Sloan said softly, they leveraged you. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I saw the reflection of my own face in the glass. It looked harder than it had that morning. If I give them the 1.8 million, I said, thinking aloud, it vanishes. It goes to pay off the most screaming creditors. Randall buys a new car to feel better. Harlan takes a consulting fee, and in 6 months, they are back in the same hole. A bridge loan just prolongs the inevitable. You cannot give them the money. Iris said, it is financial suicide. You need to walk away. Tatum, let them crash. It is the only way they learn. No, I said. I turned back to face them. If I walk away, the employees lose their jobs. Sarah the receptionist gets evicted. Miller the roofer goes out of business. The innocent bystanders get crushed while Randall and Trent blame the economy and move on to their next grift. And my name is already tied to this. If Vaughn Heritage collapses under a cloud of fraud and unpaid wages, the headlines won't say Randall Clark fails. They will say, Father of Lumen Ledger CEO accused of fraud. It will blow back on my board. It will blow back on my valuation. So what is the play? Sloan asked. We do not lend. I said. We buy. I looked at Iris. Contact the bank holding the debt. I instructed. Tell them Juniper Ridge Capital. Our shell entity is interested in the distressed paper. Offer them 50 cents on the dollar. They are desperate. They will take it. You want to become your family's creditor? Iris asked, raising an eyebrow. I want to become their owner. I corrected. If I hold the debt, I hold the keys. The loan agreement they signed with the bank has covenants, maintenance requirements, financial reporting standards. They are in breach of all of them. Iris nodded slowly. Seeing the logic, if you buy the debt, you can call a default. You can force a change in management. You can remove Randall and Trent from the operator seat without a lawsuit. You just enforce the contract. Exactly. I said, I am going to buy the debt. Then I am going to buy the liens from Miller and the others. I will consolidate every cent they owe into one pile. And I will be the one sitting on top of it. It is aggressive, Iris warned. It is hostile. When they find out you are the one holding the axe, they are not going to see it as a rescue. They are going to call you a traitor. They will call you a monster. I thought about the empty chairs at the award ceremony. I thought about the bridge loan that was really a trap. I thought about Randall shaking a contractor's hand and lying with my name on his lips. Let them, I said. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, heavy resolve. They will call me a monster because for the first time in my life, I am not following their script. I said, I am writing my own. I looked back at Sloan. Prepare the LLC paperwork. We buy the debt tomorrow morning. And Sloan, make sure the name on the LLC is completely opaque. I want them to think they are dealing with a stranger until the ink is dry. I walked out into the cool night air. The game of happy families was over. The takeover had begun. The morning sun over Austin was a bruised purple, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling glass of my conference room. But inside, the air was cold and sterile, smelling of recycled oxygen and printer toner. We were not building software today. We were building a trap. Iris Bell sat across from me, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard with the rhythmic precision of a concert pianist. On the screen projected behind her was the birth certificate of our weapon, a limited liability company filed in Delaware, the state where corporate secrets went to live in quiet anonymity. Juniper Ridge Capital, Iris announced, hitting the enter key with a satisfying clack. The registration is pending expedited approval. By noon, it will be a legal entity capable of buying, holding, and enforcing debt. I looked at the name. It sounded generic, boring, and vaguely institutional. It sounded like exactly the kind of faceless investment firm that would buy distressed assets without asking questions about the family photos hanging in the lobby. That was the point. To my father and his business consultant, Harlan, Juniper Ridge Capital would just be another shark in the ocean. They would never suspect the shark had my eyes. Structure the ownership through a blind trust. I instructed. Sipping my third espresso, I do not want my name appearing on any public registry. If Randall or Harlan runs a search, I want them to see a law firm's address in Wilmington, not my condo in downtown Austin. Iris nodded, not looking up. Already done. As far as the paper trail is concerned, you are a ghost. Sloan Mercer walked in, carrying 2 tablets, and looking like she had already fought 3 wars before 8 in the morning. She slid into the seat next to me. I have scrubbed your calendar, Sloan said. I moved the product roadmap meeting to Thursday and told the engineering leads you are doing a deep dive strategy session off-site. Technically, it is true. You are strategizing, just not about software. Thank you. Sloan, I said, I cannot have the board wondering why the CEO is distracted. They won't. Sloan assured me. I also set up a buffer for your phone. Any calls from Richmond go straight to a dedicated voicemail box. You do not talk to them until we own them. We turned our attention to the speakerphone in the center of the table. Noah Klein was on the line, patching in the debt broker he had located the night before. This was the critical juncture. We had to buy the debt before some other vulture fund snapped it up and liquidated the properties for scraps. Noah introduced us simply as the partners. No names, no locations. Gentlemen. The broker's voice was oily, the kind of voice that tried too hard to sound friendly while selling you a lemon. I have the package ready. We are looking at a principal balance of roughly $2.3 million across 6 commercial notes. The bank is motivated to sell. They want this off their books before the quarter ends. I leaned toward the microphone. I lowered the pitch of my voice slightly, adopting a tone of bored detachment. We have reviewed the summary. I said, the assets are distressed. The operator is insolvent. We are not interested in the real estate value. The buildings are likely teardowns. We are buying the paper for the leverage." Right, the broker said quickly. "But you have to understand the upside here. The borrower, well, the Clark family has significant connections." I stiffened. "Here it comes. Connections," I asked, playing dumb. "The father, Randall Clark," the broker said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "His daughter is Tatum Clark. You know, the one who just made the cover of Forbes' Lumen Ledger. She is worth nearly $100 million. The bank knows she is going to step in. She is just negotiating the terms right now. Buying this debt is basically buying a guaranteed payout from her." I felt the blood boil in my veins. It was one thing to suspect they were using my name. It was another to hear it peddled like a commodity on a conference call. Randall wasn't just asking me for a loan. He was selling shares in my existence to keep his sinking ship afloat. He was using my success as collateral for his failures. Noah cut in, sensing my rage. "If she is going to pay, why hasn't she paid yet?" Noah asked sharply. "Why is the bank selling the note for 60 cents on the dollar if it is guaranteed gold?" The broker stammered. "Well, you know families. Complicated. But the potential is there. We are not paying for potential." I said, cutting him off. "We are paying for the asset as it stands today. And today, it is garbage. We offer 50 cents on the dollar. Cash wire. Today." There was a silence on the line. I could hear the broker calculating his commission. 55, he countered weakly. "And we close by close of business." "Done," I said. "Send the purchase agreement to our counsel." The line went dead. I looked at Iris. She was already refreshing her inbox. 55 cents on the dollar. I murmured, "I am buying my family's freedom for half price." "It is not freedom." "Tatum," Iris said, her eyes scanning the first document that pinged into her email. "It is a leash. For the next 4 hours." The room became a processing center. We weren't just buying a loan. We were buying a history of negligence. The digital data room the bank provided was a horror show of mismanagement. There were tax penalties for late filings. There were insurance lapses. But the real weapon lay in the covenants. Commercial loans come with rules covenants that the borrower must follow. They have to maintain a certain debt service coverage ratio. They have to submit audited financials. They have to maintain the physical condition of the property. Randall had broken every single one. "Look at this," Iris said, highlighting a section on the screen. Clause 4.2. Change of management. The lender reserves the right to appoint a third-party management company if the borrower defaults on any financial covenant. That is the key. I said, "We do not have to foreclose and kick them out on the street. That looks cruel. Instead, we enforce Clause 4.2. We fire Randall as the manager. We fire Trent. We install a professional operator to run the business properly. We save the employees. We save the buildings. But we cut out the cancer. It was the perfect surgical strike. It stripped them of power while keeping the business alive." Then, Iris stopped. Her hands froze over the keyboard. She leaned closer to the screen, squinting. "Tatum," she said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the crisp, professional tone of a lawyer anymore. It was low and cautious. "Come look at this." I walked around the table and looked over her shoulder. She was looking at a scanned PDF of a loan modification agreement from 7 years ago. It was a document extending the credit line for the Richmond property. "Look at the guarantor page." Iris pointed. I looked. There was Randall's signature. A sprawling, arrogant scrawl. There was Claudine's, small and tight. And then, below them, was a third signature. It read, "Tatum Clark." I stared at it. The handwriting was looped and childish, trying to look adult, but it wasn't mine. And the spelling, "There is an E at the end." I whispered, "I never spell my name with an E." I looked at the date. 7 years ago. I was 27. I was struggling to pay rent on my first apartment. I had 0 assets. Why would the bank accept me as a guarantor? Iris scrolled down to the attached financial statement. It was a fabrication. It listed me as the owner of a technology consultancy with projected revenues of $200,000 a year. It listed assets I did not have. Randall forged my signature. I said, the realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It wasn't just that he used my name, he had committed a felony. He had falsified a bank document to get a loan extension. He added the E, so if it ever came up, he could claim it was a clerical error, a different Tatum. But he used my social security number. I saw the last 4 digits of my social typed neatly in the box. Iris sat back, taking off her glasses. This is fraud. Tatum, bank fraud, identity theft. If we turn this over to the FBI, Randall goes to federal prison, not for a weekend, for years. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a distant siren. I walked back to my chair and sat down heavily. I thought about the man who had hugged me last night, the man who had dared to lecture me about struggle building character. All the while, he had a felony buried in his filing cabinet, a crime he had committed against his own daughter to buy himself a few more years of playing business tycoon. He put me on the hook for millions without asking. I said, if the bank had come after the guarantors back then, they would have destroyed my credit. I would never have been able to get the initial funding for Lumen Ledger. He risked my entire future to fix a roof he let leak. Do you want to use it? Iris asked. We can blow the whole thing up right now. One call to the district attorney. I closed my eyes. I imagined Randall in handcuffs. I imagined the scandal. I imagined Claudine weeping on the news. No, I said, opening my eyes. Sloane looked at me, surprised. No, if I send him to prison, I become the daughter who jailed her father. I explained. The narrative shifts. I become the villain in the public eye, and the employees still lose their jobs because the government seizes the assets. I looked at the screen, at the forged signature that mocked me with that extra E. We keep this. I said, we download it, we notarize the discovery, but we keep it in the pocket. This is the nuclear option. If he tries to fight the takeover, if Harlan tries to sue us for hostile practices, if they try to drag my name through the mud, then we drop the bomb. But not before. I checked the time. It was 2 p.m. Wire the money, I said. Buy the debt. Iris nodded and switched windows to the banking portal. She entered the routing number. She entered the account number. She typed in $1,265,000, the agreed-upon price. Initiating transfer, she said. I watched the progress bar on the screen. It was a small green line moving from left to right. It looked so insignificant, but that green line was a bridge burning. 30%, 60%, 90%. Complete. The screen flashed. Transaction successful. Funds transferred. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. We own it, Iris said. Juniper Ridge Capital is now the primary lien holder of Vaughn Heritage Lodging. Almost immediately, my email pinged. It was an automated notification from the bank confirming the assignment of the notes. Somewhere in Richmond, a notification was popping up on a bank officer's screen. Within the hour, that officer would call Randall. He would tell him that the bank had sold the debt. He would tell him that he had a new creditor. Randall would panic. He would ask who it was. The banker would say, Juniper Ridge Capital. Randall would scream. He would curse this faceless corporation that had bought his life. He would call Harlan. They would plot how to charm or bully these new owners. They would think they were dealing with Wall Street suits or foreign investors. They had no idea that the capital they were afraid of was sitting in a conference room in Austin, drinking stale coffee and wearing a pair of sneakers. Draft the notice of default. I told Iris, but do not send it yet. I added, let them sweat for 24 hours. Let them wonder who Juniper Ridge is. Let Randall call me tonight to complain about the vultures circling him. I want to hear him lie about it one last time. Sloane smiled. A shark-like grin that matched my own. Plan Mirror is in phase 2, Sloane said. I looked at the forged signature one last time before Iris closed the window. You wanted a partner. Dad, I whispered to the empty air. You just got one. The vibration of my phone on the mahogany nightstand was not a surprise. I had been waiting for it since the bank transfer cleared yesterday afternoon. It was Randall. I let it buzz 3 times before answering. I needed him to sweat. I needed him to wonder if I had already blocked him. When I finally slid my thumb across the screen, I put the call on speaker and continued buttoning my crisp white shirt. "Hello, Dad," I said. My voice was neutral, stripped of the daughterly cadence I used to affect. "Tatum. Sweetheart." His voice boomed through the speaker, artificially loud. It had a quality I recognized immediately, the warmth of a salesman who is terrified of losing a commission. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. We were just sitting here, your mother and I, talking about how good it was to see you the other night. We felt well. We felt we might have rushed things." He paused, waiting for me to reassure him. I said nothing. I just applied my watch, the metal clasp clicking shut like a handcuff. "We want to make it right," Randall continued, filling the silence with nervous energy. "Dinner again, tonight, same place. We want to show you the respect you deserve. We have prepared a proper presentation this time. No back of the napkin stuff. Professional." I checked my reflection in the mirror. I looked like a shark in a tailored blazer. 7 o'clock, I said. Perfect. Randall sounded relieved, almost giddy. 7 o'clock. We will be waiting. I hung up. He thought he was reeling me back in. He thought my silence over the last 24 hours was hesitation, the wavering of a girl who desperate wanted her family's approval. He had no idea that while he was rehearsing his pitch, I had become his landlord. I arrived at the Richmond Country Club at 6:30. I did not give my keys to the valet this time. I parked the sedan myself in a shadowed spot near the service entrance. I did not go to the Commonwealth room immediately. Instead, I slipped into the small service corridor that ran behind the private dining suites. The walls here were thin, covered in flocked wallpaper that had not been updated since the 1990s. I stood by the crack in the door, just inches away from where my family sat. I wanted to see the rehearsal. Inside, the atmosphere was frantic. Harlan Reese was pacing the length of the room, holding a sheaf of papers. Randall was adjusting his tie in the mirror, his face flushed. Trent was arranging chairs. "Remember," Harlan hissed, his voice sharp and commanding. "Do not mention the bank. Do not mention the default notice. If she asks about the debt, you pivot. You say we are restructuring for growth." "But what if she asks to see the P&Ls again?" Trent asked, sounding whiny. "She won't," Harlan snapped. "We dazzle her with the future. You sell the dream. Trent, you talk about the new branding. You talk about the legacy. She is emotional. She wants to be part of the club. We offer her a seat on the board, and she will write the check before dessert hits the table." Randall turned from the mirror. "And keep Bryce quiet," he ordered. "If that boy opens his mouth about his crypto losses or his TikTok followers, I will disown him. We need to look like a dynasty, not a circus." I stepped back from the door, a cold smile touching my lips. They were scripting a fantasy. They were building a house of cards on a table that I had already sawed the legs off of. I signaled Sloan on my phone. "We are live. Give me 10 minutes inside alone, then execute." I walked around to the main entrance and entered the room at exactly 7 o'clock. The transformation was instant. As soon as I stepped through the door, the frantic energy evaporated. Randall turned with a beaming smile. Harlan stopped pacing and adopted a posture of relaxed authority. Trent stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Tatum," Randall said, opening his arms. "Right on time. That is my girl. Punctual. CEO material." I sidestepped the hug this time. I walked straight to the chair that had been set for me. It was still placed slightly apart from the others, but this time, there was a leather folio sitting at my place setting. It was embossed with the Vaughan Heritage Lodging crest. I sat down. I did not open the folio. I assume this is the professional presentation. I said. Harlan sat down opposite me. He clasped his hands on the table. "We heard you the other night, Tatum," Harlan said smoothly. "You wanted details. You wanted a roadmap. We respect that. You are a woman of data. So, we crunched the numbers." He reached over and flipped open the folio in front of me. It was a work of fiction. The first page was a glossy rendering of a futuristic hotel lobby. complete with a waterfall and a digital check-in kiosk. It looked nothing like the roadside motels my father actually owned. It looked like a stock photo from a luxury architectural firm. "Turn the page," Harlan urged. I turned it. It was a timeline. Phase 1, rebranding. Phase 2, expansion. Phase 3, global domination. It was filled with buzzwords like synergy, disruptive hospitality, and experiential lodging, but there were no hard numbers. There were no balance sheets. There were just bar graphs that went up and to the right, labeled with vague terms like projected brand equity. "This is impressive," I said, my voice flat. "It is the future." Trent chimed in. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with the fervor of the converted. "We are talking about a 300% ROI within 24 months. Tatum. Once we get the bridge capital, we clear out the old inventory, we renovate the facades, and we jack up the room rates. We stop catering to truckers and start catering to digital nomads." "And what is my role in this?" I asked. "Besides the checkbook." Randall cleared his throat. He looked at Trent, giving him the cue. Trent puffed out his chest. "We want to formalize your position. Tate, if you fund the bridge round, we are prepared to offer you a seat on the family board." I raised an eyebrow. "The family board." "It is a new governance structure," Harlan explained quickly. "You, Randall, Trent, and myself. We would meet quarterly. You would have a vote on major strategic decisions. You would be one of us." Finally, I looked at them. They were offering me a vote in a democracy of fools. They were offering me a seat on the board of the Titanic after it had already hit the iceberg. It was insulting. They thought my desire for belonging was so desperate that I would pay nearly $2 million for a title that meant nothing. I closed the folio. I pushed it away from me. "It is a beautiful picture," I said, "but I have a question." "Ask away," Randall said, confident now. "Who holds the paper?" I asked. The room went still. The confidence flickered. "Excuse me," Harlan said, feigning deafness. "The debt." I said clearly, "The mortgages on the 6 properties. Who holds them right now?" Randall laughed. A nervous, jagged sound. "The bank." "Of course." "First Regional?" "Same as always." "Why does that matter? Does First Regional still hold it?" I pressed. "Or did they sell it?" Harlan's eyes narrowed. He looked at me with a new intensity. "Why would you ask that?" "Because banks don't usually let borrowers bridge a loan when they are in default." I said, "And I know you are in default." Randall slammed his hand on the table. "We are not in default. We are in a negotiation period." "It is a technicality. It is not a technicality when you miss payroll." "Dad," I said, "it is not a technicality when roofers are filing liens against the property." Trent stood up. "Who have you been talking to? Have you been snooping?" I did not answer him. I kept my eyes on Harlan. "If I write this check," I said, "where does the money go? Does it go to the renovation? Or does it go to pay off a judgment to keep the doors open for 1 more month?" Harlan leaned back. His face was cold. "It goes where the business needs it to go." Harlan said, "That is what partners do. They trust the operators." I checked my watch. 7:10. "Trust requires truth." I said, "And you are lying to me." Randall's face turned purple. "How dare you? You come here. You drink my wine. You sit at my table. And you call me a liar. I am your father. I built this company from nothing. You inherited it." I corrected him. "And you destroyed it." Randall looked like he was about to lunge across the table. "I do not need your money that bad. Get out. If you are not going to help the family, then get out." "Wait," Harlan said. He held up a hand to stop Randall. He was looking at me, really looking at me, realizing that I wasn't flinching. "What do you know?" Tatum Harlan asked quietly. I did not answer. Instead, I looked toward the door. "Now," I said. The heavy oak doors swung open. They did not open for a waiter this time. They opened for Sloan Mercer and Iris Bell. Sloan was wearing a black power suit, carrying a heavy banker's box. Iris was flanked by 2 men in dark suit security I had hired for the evening, just in case Randall's temper became physical. "Who the hell are they?" Trent demanded. "My team." I said. Randall stood up, knocking his chair over. You cannot bring strangers in here. This is a private dinner. I will have you thrown out. Iris Bell walked calmly to the table. She did not look at Randall. She looked at me. I nodded. Iris opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. They were thick, bound in blue legal covers. She placed them on the table with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the silent room. "Mr. Clark?" Iris said, her voice cool and professional. "My name is Iris Bell. I am the general counsel for Juniper Ridge Capital." Randall blinked. "Who Juniper Ridge Capital?" Iris repeated. "The entity that purchased the promissory notes and mortgage deeds for all 6 Vaughn Heritage Lodging properties from First Regional Bank as of 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon." She slid the top document across the table. It stopped right in front of Randall's plate, knocking over his wineglass. The red wine spilled onto the white tablecloth, looking like a gunshot wound. Randall looked at the document. He looked at the logo. He looked at the transfer stamp. "The bank sold the debt," Randall whispered. "They can't do that without notifying me." "They notified you via certified mail and email this morning," Iris said. "You chose to ignore it." Harlan snatched the paper from the table. He scanned it frantically, his eyes darting back and forth. "This is hostile," Harlan snarled. "You are a vulture fund. You bought this at a discount to squeeze us. We bought it to secure the asset," Iris said. Trent looked from Harlan to Randall, panic rising in his voice. "What does this mean, Dad? What does this mean?" "It means," Harlan said, dropping the paper, "that we owe them the money now. Not the bank. Them." He looked at Iris. "Fine," Harlan said. "You want to play hardball? We will negotiate a payment plan. We will restructure." "I am afraid that is not an option," Iris said. She pulled out another document. "This is a notice of default," she announced. "Pursuant to Clause 4.2 of the original loan agreement, the borrower is in breach of multiple covenants: financial reporting, maintenance standards, guarantor solvency." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Therefore, Juniper Ridge Capital is exercising its right to accelerate the debt. The full amount is due immediately. Furthermore, we are exercising our right to appoint a receiver to take over operations effectively immediately." Randall looked like he had been punched in the gut. "You can't do that. You can't take my company. It is not your company." "Mr. Clark," Iris said, "it is the bank's company, and now it is our company." "But why?" Randall yelled. "Why are you doing this? Who are you people?" I stood up then. I picked up the glass of water in front of me and took a slow sip. "They are not doing it," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. I said. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Bryce, who had been silent the entire time, staring at the scene with his mouth open, was the one who broke it. "Wait," Bryce said. His voice was small, confused. He looked from the documents to me. "Juniper Ridge, that's you." I looked at my brother. "Yes, Bryce." So Bryce stammered. "You are the creditor. You are the one we owe the money to." "Yes," I said. Randall stared at me. His eyes were bulging. His face went from red to a ghostly pale. "You bought the debt," he whispered. "You bought my debt. I didn't lend you the money." "Dad," I said coldly. "I bought the leverage." Why? Claudine cried out from her seat. She was clutching her pearls, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this to your own family? We asked you for help. You asked for a handout." I said, "You asked me to pour water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom." I walked around the table until I was standing behind Randall's chair. He did not turn to look at me. He was staring at the wine stain on the tablecloth. "You called me here to sell me a lie." I said to the room, "You showed me pretty pictures of a hotel you have no intention of building. You tried to sell me a seat on a board that doesn't exist. You tried to trade my inheritance for my compliance." I placed my hand on the back of Randall's chair. "I told you I needed to see the books. You refused. So I bought the books." Harlan stood up slowly. "This is a betrayal, Tatum. This is biblical. You are destroying your father's legacy." "My father's legacy is a fraud," I snapped, my voice finally rising. "It is unpaid wages. It is rotting roofs. It is liens from honest contractors that he stiffed. I looked at Randall. You were going to take my $1.8 million and burn it. I said, just like you burned everything else. And when the money ran out, you would have blamed me. You would have told everyone that I didn't give enough. I motioned to Sloane. She stepped forward and placed a new folder on the table. This is the path forward. I said, it is not a negotiation. It is a notification. Randall looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears of rage and self-pity. You are a monster, he spat. I smiled. It was the smile of someone who finally understood the joke. No. Dad, I said softly. A monster is someone who eats their young to survive. I am just the one who stopped feeding you. I turned to Iris. Read them the terms of the surrender. I said, I walked back to my seat, but I did not sit down. I stood there, watching them, watching the realization sink in. They had invited a sheep to the slaughter, but they had forgotten to check if the sheep had teeth. Trent was reading the surrender terms, his hands shaking. We lose everything he asked. We lose our salaries, our titles. You keep your dignity if you sign. I said, you lose everything if you fight. Bryce looked at me, a strange expression on his face. It wasn't anger, it was almost respect. Damn, Bryce whispered. That is a boss move. Shut up, Bryce Randall screamed. I looked at my father one last time. You called me for money. Dad, I said, I came to stop you from using family as a receipt. The account is closed. I nodded to Iris to proceed. The dinner was over. The acquisition was complete. The transition from negotiation to warfare was instantaneous. I had expected them to be shocked, perhaps even shamed into silence by the revelation that I was the one holding the leash. I was naive. Shame requires a conscience, and my family was currently operating on a deficit of both cash and morality. The moment I walked out of the Commonwealth room, the assault began. It did not start with lawyers. It started with the weapon of the weak noise. Trent was the first to fire. He followed me into the hallway, his face a mask of red-hot indignation. He did not care that we were in a public club. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my blazer. Conflict of interest, Trent shouted, his voice echoing off the marble floors. He looked around, hoping for an audience. You cannot be the lender and the hostile bidder. Tatum, that is illegal. That is insider trading or something. I will sue you. I will have your license revoked. I pulled my arm free with a sharp jerk. I do not have a license. Trent, I am a tech CEO, not a stockbroker. And owning debt is not a conflict. It is a position. Ask your lawyer if you can afford one. I walked away, leaving him sputtering about fiduciary duties he could not even spell. But Trent's legal ignorance was the least of my problems. The real contagion was spreading online. By the time I reached my apartment in Austin the next morning, my phone was glowing with notifications. Bryce had taken his grievances to the digital square. He was smart enough not to name me directly likely on Harlan's advice, but he was vague enough to inflict damage. He had posted an Instagram story. It was a black screen with white, stark text, accompanied by a sad violin track. Crazy how money changes blood. You think you know someone, but the moment they get a little fame, they turn their back on the people who raised them. Sad day for the Clark family. Betrayal. Fake family first. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive manipulation. Within 2 hours, my direct messages were filled with inquiries from people I had not spoken to since high school. Is everything okay? I saw Bryce's post. Did you really cut them off? The local Richmond gossip mill was churning. In a small town, the narrative of the ungrateful daughter who made it big and forgot her roots was delicious. It confirmed their bias that ambition was a sin. Then came the call from my mother, or rather, the call my mother made to the Richmond Gazette. Sloane walked into my office at 10 o'clock, her face grim. She was holding a tablet. We have a situation with a local reporter. Sloane said, a woman named Patricia Vance. She writes the lifestyle column. Apparently. Claudine called her this morning in tears. What did she say, I asked? not looking up from my monitor. Sloane read from her notes. She claimed that a prominent local tech figure, she didn't name you, but it is obvious is using predatory financial tactics to evict her elderly parents from their family business. She used the phrase, elder abuse, twice. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. Elder abuse. Claudine was 58 and played tennis 3 times a week. Randall was 60. They were not feeble pensioners. They were incompetent operators, but the accusation was designed to stick. Kill it, I said. Have Iris send a cease and desist to the paper. Tell them if they print a single word of an unsubstantiated claim that damages my reputation or the reputation of Lumen Ledger. We will own their printing press by Friday. Sloane nodded. Already done. Iris put the fear of God into the editor. They are not running the story, but the rumor is out there. Tatum, people are talking. Let them talk, I said, typing furiously. Rumors do not hold up in court. Contracts do, but the attacks did not stay local. At noon, the war crossed the line from personal grievance to corporate sabotage. I was in the middle of a code review when my inbox pinged with a high-priority alert from our sales director. We were in the final stages of closing a partnership with a major payment processor, a deal that would solidify our valuation. Subject concern regarding compliance inquiry. I opened the email. The partner had received an anonymous tip. It was sent from a burner email address, something generic like truthseeker123. The email accused Tatum Clark of using a shell company, Juniper Ridge Capital, to launder money from the startup into personal real estate assets to hide funds from investors. It claimed that the $92 million valuation was being siphoned off to cover family debts. I stared at the screen. The accusation was a clumsy lie. I was using my own personal capital. Not company funds, but the terminology was specific. Shell company, hidden debts, Juniper Ridge. Only 4 people outside of my team knew the name Juniper Ridge Randall: Claudine, Trent, and Harlan. This was not an emotional outburst. This was Harlan. He was trying to torch my credibility to force me to back down. He knew that a fintech CEO accused of money laundering was a dead CEO. He was betting that I would drop the debt takeover to save my reputation. He bet wrong. Get Iris in here, I yelled, my voice cracking through the open office. Now, 5 minutes later, my war room was assembled. This is defamation per se, Iris said, reading the anonymous email. Malicious intent to damage business relations. We can trace the IP, but it is likely a VPN. I do not care about the IP. I said, we know who sent it. This is Harlan's handwriting. He is trying to hostage trade my company for his. Sloane looked at me. What is the play if we deny it too loudly? We look guilty. If we ignore it, the partner might walk. We go on the offensive. I said, we draft a transparent disclosure to the partner. We show them the incorporation papers of Juniper Ridge. We show them the source of funds, my personal savings and stock liquidation. Fully audited. We prove that Lumen Ledger and Juniper Ridge are church and state. And then Iris asked, and then we hit the family where it actually hurts. I said, we stop playing defense. I turned to Noah, who was on the speakerphone. Noah, what is the word on the street? Is Randall looking for money? He is desperate. Noah replied, I heard from a hard money lender in Virginia about an hour ago. Randall is shopping a deal. He is asking for $500,000 at 20% interest. High risk. I noted, what is the collateral? Noah paused. This is the bad part. Tatum, he is showing them the Forbes magazine again, but he is also showing them an email thread. What email thread? He has an old email from you, from 3 years ago, where you said, I will always help the family. He is presenting it as a letter of intent. He is telling lenders that you are just playing hardball for tax reasons, but that you are ultimately the guarantor. He is using your name to secure high-interest debt that he has no way of paying back. I closed my eyes. He was doing it again, even with my boot on his neck. He was still trying to sell my future. That is a covenant breach, Iris said softly. I opened my eyes. Explain. The loan agreement for the motels, Iris said. Clause 7.1. The borrower shall not incur any additional indebtedness secured by the collateral or the reputation of the guarantor without express written consent of the lender. By shopping for a second mortgage, and by using your name, which is technically the name of the guarantor on the original note, he is actively violating the terms of the debt we now own. So we have him. I said, we have him. Iris confirmed. We do not need to wait for a missed payment. We can accelerate the debt based on this breach alone. We can file the notice of default today. Do it, I said. I looked at Sloan. But I want a surgical separation. I want a statement prepared for the employees of Vaughn Heritage. I want Sarah and the housekeeping staff to know that their paychecks are safe. I want them to know that Juniper Ridge is stepping in to stabilize the ship, not to sink it. We are removing the captain, not the crew. I will draft it, Sloan said. We will frame it as a rescue operation. I spent the next hour reviewing the legal filings. Every document was a nail in the coffin of my relationship with my parents. I was not just suing them, I was dismantling their identity. Randall was nothing without his title of business owner. Trent was nothing without his unearned authority. At 4 p.m, my personal cell phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. Area code 212. New York. I answered. This is Tatum Clark. Ms. Clark, this is David Thorne from Forbes editorial, the voice said. My stomach dropped. Forbes? Mr. Thorne? I said, keeping my voice steady. To what do I owe the pleasure? We received a disturbing call today. Ms. Clark, the editor said, a woman claiming to be your mother, Claudine Clark, contacted our fact-checking department. She alleges that the financial data you provided for our Founder of the Year profile was falsified. She claims your startup is funded by stolen family assets. I felt the room spin. Claudine, my own mother. She was trying to strip the award from me. She would rather see me destroyed than see me win without her permission. She also mentioned something about a hostile takeover of her retirement fund. The editor continued. We take these allegations seriously, Ms. Clark. We stand by our reporting. But if there is an active investigation, there is no investigation, I said, my voice ice cold. There is a family dispute regarding a separate entity. My mother is distressed because I refused to provide a personal loan for her failing business. I see, the editor said, sounding unconvinced. Can you provide documentation? I will send you the audited financials of Lumen Ledger within the hour. I said, and I will send you the court filings that show my parents are currently being pursued for fraud and wage theft. You can decide who has the credibility problem. I hung up. My hand was shaking. They had gone nuclear. They were willing to burn my $92 million valuation to the ground just to spite me. I looked at the phone. A text message popped up. It was from Randall. I warned you. You think you are big. You are nothing without us. I made you, and I will make you lose everything. Drop the debt or the next call is to the SEC. I stared at the words, I will make you lose everything. It was not a threat from a father. It was a threat from a parasite realizing the host was detaching. I looked up at Iris and Sloan. They were watching me, waiting for the order. Send the notice of default, I said, and serve them with a restraining order for harassment. I typed a reply to Randall. I did not try to reason with him. I did not appeal to his love. I spoke the only language he understood. Go ahead, call them. But read the attachment first. I attached the PDF of the forged loan document from 7 years ago, the one with the extra E in my name. I have the original. Dad, if you speak my name to the press one more time, I walk into the FBI field office. I hit send. The line went silent. The counterattack was over. I had pushed the button. Now, I just had to watch the explosion. The email to David Thorne at Forbes was not a plea. It was a data dump. I sat in my office at Lumen Ledger, the city lights of Austin blurring into streaks of gold and red outside my window, and hit send. The attachment was 40 megabytes of irrefutable truth. I included the capitalization table of my company, certified by our third-party auditors. I included the forensic accounting of my personal assets, tracing every cent of the seed funding back to legitimate venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. Not a failing motel chain in Virginia, I included the incorporation documents of Juniper Ridge Capital, showing it was funded entirely by my own post-tax liquidity, completely separate from Lumen Ledger's operating budget. I added a simple note in the body of the email, Mr. Thorne, you are being used as a pawn in a family extortion attempt. The attached documents prove the solvency and independence of my company. The people feeding you these lies are currently facing a hostile debt takeover due to gross mismanagement. Do not let their desperation become your liability. I leaned back in my chair. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was the clean silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. It was Thorne. Received. We are reviewing. On first glance, this looks definitive. If these documents hold up, we will not be pursuing the story. And Ms. Clark, you might want to look into a restraining order. The first bomb had been defused. My reputation and the $92 million valuation of my life's work was safe, but the war was far from over. Iris walked in, holding a tablet. She looked less like a lawyer and more like a hunter who had just trapped a particularly slow rabbit. We found the source of the money laundering accusation, Iris said, placing the tablet on my desk. Harlan, I asked. Indirectly. She nodded. We traced the email headers. It wasn't a sophisticated hack. It came from a click farm in Eastern Europe that offers reputation management services. We subpoenaed the payment processor for the service. The credit card on file belongs to a consulting firm registered to Harlan Reese. He paid $200 for a bot to call you a criminal, Iris said, her voice dripping with disdain. He didn't even use a burner card. He used his corporate Amex. I looked at the receipt on the screen. It was pathetic. It was sloppy. It was exactly the kind of corner cutting that had defined my family's business practices for decades. Do we leak it? Iris asked. We could destroy Harlan's consulting business by tomorrow morning. I shook my head. No, not yet. If we release it now, it looks like a petty squabble. We keep it in the chamber. It is leverage. I want them to know I have it, but I want them to wonder when I will use it. Sloan entered the room a moment later, carrying a thick binder. The Juniper Ridge logo was embossed on the front. The restructuring plan is ready. Sloan said, we are ready to transmit it to the debtor. This was the pivot. Up until now, I had been reacting. Now, I was governing. The plan was not designed to punish. It was designed to heal. We had outlined a strategy to immediately settle the mechanic's liens. Davis Miller, the roofer, would be paid in full by Friday. The payroll arrears for the housekeeping staff Sarah and her team would be cleared within 48 hours. We were setting up a capital expenditure fund to fix the mold issues and the plumbing, but the cost of this rescue was leadership. The plan called for the immediate removal of Randall Clark as the operator. It called for the termination of Trent Clark's contract as vice president of operations. It called for the dissolution of the advisory agreement with Harlan Reese. It is a coup, Sloan noted, watching my face. A benevolent coup, but a coup nonetheless. Send it, I said. An hour later, as I was preparing for the inevitable explosion of rage from Richmond, an email arrived in the general inbox of Juniper Ridge Capital. It was flagged as high priority. The sender was distinct, Henderson Vaughn Heritage, Gary Henderson, the general manager of the Richmond property. He was a quiet man, a career hotelier who had worked for my father for 20 years. I remembered him as the man who used to slip me free sodas from the vending machine when I was a kid, waiting for my dad to finish work. I opened the email. The subject line was simply, for the new owners. Dear Juniper Ridge partners, I do not know who you are, but I know you have bought the debt. I am writing this at great personal risk, but I cannot stay silent anymore. If you are going to audit the books, you need to look at the customer deposit account for the years 2022 through present. Mr. Clark has been instructing me to transfer escrow funds deposits for weddings and large group bookings into the general operating account to cover marketing expenses. I have attached the wire transfer request signed by Randall Clark. I was told these were temporary loans, but the money was never returned. I believe the total shortfall is over $60,000. I stared at the screen. my blood turning to ice. This wasn't just mismanagement. This wasn't just incompetence. Commingling escrow funds was theft. It was a direct violation of state regulations. If a bride showed up for her wedding and the deposit was gone, that was fraud. I clicked on the attachments. There were PDFs of handwritten notes from Randall. Gary, move $5,000 from the deposit account to the main. Need to cover the club dues. We'll put it back next week. He never put it back. He had been stealing from his customers to pay for his lifestyle, and he had forced his general manager to be an accomplice. I looked up at Iris and Sloane. The room felt very small. This ends tonight, I said. I did not go to Richmond. I did not give them the dignity of a physical presence. I sent a calendar invite for a video conference to Randall, Claudine, Trent, and Harlan. The subject line was Settlement Conference. At 8 o'clock, their faces appeared on the large monitor in my conference room. They were gathered in the living room of my parents' house. Randall was red-faced, holding a glass of scotch. Trent looked sullen. Harlan looked wary. Claudine was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "You have some nerve," Randall started, his voice booming through the speakers. "Sending us legal threats, trying to steal the company from under us." I sat calmly at the head of the table, my hands folded. "I am not stealing anything. Dad," I said, "I am salvaging the wreckage. We read your restructuring plan." Harlan sneered. "You want to fire us? You want to kick your own father out of the building he bought? We will never agree to that. We will fight you in court for 10 years. We will claim you acted in bad faith." "You can try," I said, "but before you file any motions, you might want to look at the document I just emailed you." I saw them look down at a laptop on the coffee table. I saw Trent click the link. I saw the color drain from Randall's face. "It is a log of the escrow transfers," I said, my voice steady. $63,000 of guest deposits moved into the general fund and then spent on non-business expenses. Country club dues, car lease payments for Trent, a consulting retainer for Harlan. Randall sputtered. "That is internal accounting. That is cash flow management. It is embezzlement." I cut him off. "It is a felony, and I have the signed instructions from you to Gary Henderson forcing him to do it." Silence descended on the living room in Richmond. Even Harlan looked shaken. He knew the law. He knew that consulting fees paid from stolen escrow funds made him a beneficiary of fraud. "Here is the situation," I said. "I have enough evidence to send the police to your door tonight. I have the forged loan document from 7 years ago. I have the evidence of wage theft. And now, I have proof that you are stealing from your customers." Claudine let out a sob. "Tatum, please. You wouldn't put your father in jail. You are not that cruel. Think of the neighbors. Think of what people will say." I looked at my mother. She was still worried about the neighbors. She was still worried about the facade. "I am not the one who broke the law, Mom," I said, "but I am the only one who can stop the consequences." I leaned forward toward the camera. "Here is the deal. It is a take-it-or-leave-it offer. It expires in 30 minutes. I signaled Sloane, who put a single slide on the shared screen. Option A. I read, "You fight me. I release the evidence to the district attorney. I foreclose on the properties. You lose the business. You lose the house, which is cross-collateralized, and Randall likely spends the next 5 years in a minimum security prison." Randall flinched. Option B. I continued. "You surrender. You sign over full operational control to Juniper Ridge immediately. Randall, you retire. Trent, you resign. Harlan, your contract is terminated. In exchange, I will not file criminal charges. I will personally cover the missing $60,000 in the escrow account so the customers do not lose their money." I paused. "And," I added, "I will provide a one-time exit package of $250,000. $250,000, Trent scoffed. "That is an insult. The properties are worth millions. The properties are mortgaged for more than they are worth." "Trent," I snapped, "the equity is zero. The brand value is negative. I am offering you $250,000 for a pile of debt and a criminal record. That is charity. But there are conditions," I said, ignoring his outburst. You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You sign a non-disparagement agreement. If you ever mention my name, my company, or this deal to the press again, the money is clawed back and I release the evidence to the FBI. You take the money and you go away. You retire to Florida. You play golf. But you do not run a business, and you certainly do not run my life. Randall looked at the screen. He looked old. The bluster was gone. He realized that the game was over. He had no cards left. The Forbes article, the threats, the emotional manipulation, I had countered all of it. We need more, Harlan said weakly. 500, 250, I repeated, and the clock is ticking. You have 20 minutes. Claudine looked at Randall. Randy, please, take it. I cannot go through a trial. Randall stared at me through the camera. There was no love in his eyes, only a cold, hard resentment. He hated me not because I was winning, but because I was right. Fine, Randall whispered. I want it in writing. I said, Iris has sent the DocuSign. All of you. Now, I watched as they opened their phones. I watched as they tapped the screens. One by one, the notifications popped up on my end. Signed, signed, signed. It is done, I said. The money will be wired to a trust account tomorrow. The new management team arrives at 8 a.m. Gary Henderson is the interim operator. Do not go to the office. Do not touch a computer. Just leave. I ended the call. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. I had saved the employees. I had protected my company. I had neutralized the threat. But I just felt tired. I felt the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of someone who has had to amputate a limb to save the body. Iris reached out and touched my hand. You did the right thing. Tatum, you saved them from themselves. I know, I said quietly. But they will never forgive me for it. My phone buzzed again. I looked down, expecting a final curse from Randall. It was a text from Bryce. Hey sis, just saw the guys freaking out. Looks like you won. Listen, I always knew Dad was sketchy. I'm glad you took over. Maybe I could come work for you. I could run the social media for the new hotel brand. I'm totally on your side. I stared at the message. Bryce, the weather vane. He saw the wind change direction and was trying to pivot. He wanted to attach himself to the winner. I typed a reply. No, the deal included everyone. Find your own way. Bryce. I blocked his number. I stood up to leave. The office was dark now, save for the cleaning crew moving in the distance. I walked toward the elevator. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a number I did not recognize. No caller ID. I hesitated, then opened the message. It was an audio file. No text. Just a 30-second clip. I pressed play. The sound was grainy. Recorded in a room with an echo, it sounded like the country club dining room. I heard the clink of silverware. Then I heard Randall's voice. It must have been recorded weeks ago. Perhaps by a waiter. Perhaps by someone at a nearby table. She thinks she is special. Randall's voice sneered on the recording. But she is weak. If she doesn't pay up, I will burn her down. I don't care if she ends up on the street. I will drag her name through the mud until she is unhireable. A daughter owes her father everything. If I have to destroy her to get my money, I will do it with a smile. The recording ended. I stared at the phone. The timestamp showed it was sent 2 minutes ago. Below the audio file, a single line of text appeared. I thought you should know what you really paid for. I didn't know who sent it. Maybe Gary Henderson, maybe a disgruntled club member, maybe even Harlan, trying to sow chaos one last time. But it didn't matter. The voice was real. The hate was real. I put the phone in my pocket. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, sealing me in. I had paid $250,000, but I hadn't paid for a hotel. I had paid for the truth, and it was worth every penny. The conference room at the flagship Vaughan Heritage Hotel smelled of lemon polish and decay. It was a windowless box in the basement, the only room large enough to hold the wreckage of a 40-year legacy. I sat at the head of the heavy oak table, a position my father had occupied for decades, but today the dynamic was inverted. I had called this meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. By 9:15, the room was full. On the left side of the table sat the new administration myself, Iris Bell, Sloan Mercer, and a man named Marcus Thorne, the veteran hotel operator I had flown in from Chicago to take over the day-to-day management. On the right side sat the defendants Randall, Claudine, Trent, and Harlan. They looked like prisoners of war who had been allowed to keep their expensive suits. Randall was pale, his eyes rimmed with red, likely from a sleepless night and too much scotch. Trent was fidgeting, checking his watch every 30 seconds as if he had somewhere more important to be. Claudine was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. Only Harlan met my gaze, his eyes hard and calculating, still looking for an angle, still looking for a weakness. Randall cleared his throat. The sound was wet and jagged. "So," he said, his voice trying to summon a ghost of his old authority, "we signed your papers last night. We agreed to the buyout. Why are we here? Just wire the money so we can leave. I do not want to look at you any longer than I have to." I placed my hands flat on the table. "We are here because the transition of power requires a physical handover," I said, "and because there are loose ends that the digital signatures did not cover." Harlan leaned forward. "We have a deal. Tatum, $250,000. Immunity from prosecution. We signed the NDAs. If you are trying to change the terms now, that is a breach of contract. I am not changing the terms." I said, "I am enforcing them." I nodded to Marcus Thorne. He stood up. He was a large man with a gentle demeanor, but he had a reputation for turning around failing properties with military precision. "Mr. Clark," Marcus said, addressing Randall, "my team did a preliminary walkthrough of the property at 6 this morning. We found the maintenance logs, or rather, the lack of them." Randall waved a dismissive hand. "We kept the records in my office. We found those, too." Marcus continued. "We also found the instructions you gave to the housekeeping staff to dilute the cleaning chemicals to save money. We found the emails instructing the kitchen to serve expired produce. That is a lie." Randall shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "We run a 5-star operation. You run a health hazard." Marcus said calm. "But that stops today. My team is already on site. We are restocking the inventory. We are paying the staff the back wages you stole from them, and we are doing it without firing a single employee." Trent scoffed. "You cannot turn a profit if you pay full wages. That is business 101. That is why you are sitting on that side of the table." "Trent," I cut in, "because you think exploitation is a business model," Harlan interjected, his voice slick. "Look, this is all very touching. The saintly daughter saves the peasants. We get it. But we have a legal agreement. You bought the debt. You bought the equity. We are out. So unless you have a check for us, this meeting is over. In fact, I am already drafting a motion to sue for conflict of interest. You acted as both the creditor and the hostile acquirer. You used inside information, family information, to drive down the purchase price." I looked at Iris. She smiled. A sharp, dangerous expression. "I was hoping you would bring that up." "Harlan," Iris said. She opened her briefcase. It was the same motion she had used at the dinner. But this time, the document she pulled out was different. It was old. The paper was slightly yellowed. "We conducted a forensic audit of the loan documents yesterday," Iris said. "We wanted to make sure the chain of title was clean before we finalized the payout, and we found something interesting in the guarantor files from 7 years ago." She slid the paper across the table. It spun slowly and came to a stop in front of Claudine. My mother looked down. She frowned, squinting at the page. "What is this?" Claudine asked. "It looks like a loan extension. Look at the signature page." "Mrs. Clark?" Iris said. Claudine turned the page. Her eyes widened. She looked at the signature at the bottom. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at Randall. "Tatum," she whispered, "you co-signed the loan in 2018. "No, Mom," I said quietly. "I didn't." Claudine looked confused. "But your name is here. Tatum Clark, with an E. I never spell my name with an E," I said, "and in 2018, I was living in a studio apartment eating ramen. I didn't have the assets to guarantee a $10 lunch, let alone a $2 million commercial loan." The room went deadly silent. Claudine turned slowly to look at her husband. Randall was staring at the wall, his jaw tight, a vein pulsing in his temple. Randall, Claudine asked, her voice trembling, "Did you sign this?" Randall didn't answer. Harlan closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. He knew. Of course he knew. Iris spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is bank fraud. Mrs. Clark, it is identity theft. Your husband forged his daughter's signature and used her social security number to secure financing. He made her liable for millions of dollars of debt without her knowledge. If the hotel had gone under 5 years ago, the bank would have come for Tatum. They would have garnished her wages. They would have destroyed her credit. She would never have been able to start Lumen Ledger." Claudine put a hand to her mouth. "Do you put her in danger? You used her. I had to." Randall exploded. He turned on Claudine, his face twisted with defensiveness. "We were going to lose the franchise license. I needed a third guarantor. It was just a signature." "Claudine, it was on paper. It didn't hurt her. She didn't even know. It didn't hurt me." I asked, my voice rising. "You gambled with my life, Dad. You bet my future on your incompetence." "I didn't think I would lose," Randall shouted back. "I thought I would turn it around. It was a temporary fix." "It is a felony," Iris snapped, "and it carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 2 years in federal prison." Trent, who had been silent, suddenly pushed his chair back. The screech of metal on tile was deafening. "I didn't know." Trent stammered. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. "Tate, I swear, I didn't know about this. I was just the VP of operations. I handled the vendors. Dad and Harlan handled the financing. I never saw this document." "You are throwing your father to the wolves?" Harlan asked, looking at Trent with disgust. "I am not going to jail for him," Trent yelled. "I have a fiancé. I have a life." He looked at me, pleading. "Tate, please. You know how he is. He tells us what to sign, and we sign it. I am a victim here too." I looked at my brother. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic cowardice. He was willing to bury his father to save his own skin. "Sit down, Trent," I said with disgust. I turned my attention to Bryce. He was sitting at the far end of the table, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. "And you?" "Bryce," I asked. "Did you know?" Bryce looked up. He looked young and scared. "I heard them talking once," Bryce mumbled. "A few years ago, Dad and Harlan, they were laughing about how the bank bought the tech genius story." He paused, then looked at Randall. "Dad told me." Bryce hesitated. "He said the Forbes article was the whistle." I froze. "The whistle." "Yeah," Bryce said, his voice barely a whisper. "When the news about your valuation came out," Dad said, "finally, the dog whistle works. Now we call her back and she pays for everything." The air left the room. A dog whistle. That was what I was to him. A dog to be summoned. An animal to be trained and commanded. He hadn't called me because he missed me. He hadn't called me because he was desperate. He had called me because he felt he owned me. And it was time to harvest the crop he had planted with a forged signature 7 years ago. Randall sat there, seething. He wasn't denying it. His silence was a confession. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "I have one more thing for the record," I said. I placed the phone on the center of the table and pressed play. The audio file I had received the night before filled the room. "She thinks she is special, but she is weak. If she doesn't pay up, I will burn her down. I don't care if she ends up on the street. I will drag her name through the mud until she is unhireable. A daughter owes her father everything. If I have to destroy her to get my money, I will do it with a smile." The recording ended. The echo of Randall's malice hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Claudine was weeping openly now, her face buried in her hands. She finally saw the man she had been protecting for 40 years. He wasn't a misunderstood businessman. He was a predator. Randall stared at the phone. He looked up at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, only hatred. "Who sent you?" that he hissed. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that everyone in this room knows exactly who holds the keys now." I stood up. "Here is the situation," I said. "I have the forgery. I have the embezzlement records. I have the witness testimony from Bryce. And I have this recording. I picked up a folder from the table and tossed it in front of Randall. This is the exit agreement. It grants you the $250,000 we discussed. It also includes a permanent restraining order. You will never contact me again. You will never contact my company. You will never step foot on any property owned by Vaughn Heritage or Juniper Ridge. And if I don't sign Randall challenged, then Iris calls the FBI. I said, they are waiting for her call. They are very interested in the forgery case. Randall looked at the document. He looked at Harlan. Harlan shrugged. It is over. Randall, she has the royal flush. Sign the paper. Take the money. We are done. Randall picked up the pen. His hand was shaking, not with fear, but with rage. He signed his name with a violent scratch of the pen. He threw the pen across the room. It hit the wall with a crack. He stood up. He loomed over the table, glaring at me. You think you won, he said, his voice low and venomous. You think because you have the money, you are the winner, but you are empty. Tatum. You have no family. You have no home. You are no longer my daughter. He spat. I disown you. You are dead to me. I looked him in the eye. I didn't feel the sting I expected. I didn't feel the crushing weight of rejection. I felt light. I felt like a diver cutting the weights that had been dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. I accepted that resignation a long time ago. Dad, I said softly. I looked at Claudine. She was looking at me with tragic, tear-filled eyes. She wanted to say something. She wanted to apologize, but she didn't. She stood up and moved to Randall's side. She chose him. She would always choose him. Goodbye, Mom, I said. Trent and Bryce scrambled to sign their copies of the agreement. They didn't look at me. They just wanted the money. They wanted out. Get out, I said. They filed out of the room. Randall went first, storming out without looking back. Claudine followed, her head bowed. Trent and Bryce trailed behind like beaten dogs. Harlan was the last to leave. He stopped at the door. He looked at me with a grudging respect. You play a hard game. Tatum, Harlan said. I learned from the best. Uncle Harlan, I replied. He smirked, then walked out, closing the door behind him. The room was suddenly quiet. The air felt cleaner. Marcus Thorne looked at me. Are you okay? Ms. Clark, he asked gently. I looked at the empty chairs on the other side of the table. I looked at the signed documents that legally severed me from the people who shared my DNA. I am fine, Marcus, I said. I sat down and opened my laptop. Now, let us talk about the renovation budget. We have a hotel to save. The morning of the final transfer was gray and heavy, the kind of weather that felt like the sky was pressing down on the earth. We were gathered in the conference room of a neutral law firm in downtown Richmond. This was not the family dining table, and it was not the basement of the hotel. This was the sterile ground of finality. Despite the dramatic surrender the night before, Randall Clark was not going quietly. The settlement agreement he had scratched his signature onto was a binding contract, but the transfer of deeds, the actual legal instrument that would strip him of his property rights, still required a wet signature in front of a notary, and Randall was refusing to pick up the pen. He sat with his arms crossed, staring at the document as if it were a death warrant. His lawyer, a frazzled man he had hired that morning, was whispering urgently in his ear. I am not signing it, Randall announced, his voice echoing in the glass-walled room. He looked at me with a mixture of exhaustion and defiance. I woke up this morning and realized I made a mistake. I signed that settlement under duress. You cornered me. You threatened me. That makes the agreement void. I sat perfectly still. I did not look at his lawyer. I looked at Iris Bell. Iris adjusted her glasses and looked at Randall's counsel. Your client is welcome to test that theory in court, Iris said, her tone as dry as dust. However, if he refuses to execute the transfer of deeds by noon today, we will consider the settlement agreement breached. She turned a page in her binder. That means the offer of $250,000 is rescinded. She continued, it means we revert to the notice of default. We will proceed with an immediate foreclosure on all 6 properties. We will also file the criminal referral regarding the forged loan documents from 7 years ago and the embezzlement of the escrow funds. Randall's lawyer looked pale. Mr. Clark, if they file the criminal referral, I cannot protect you from the federal investigation. I do not care, Randall shouted. He slammed his fist onto the mahogany table. Let them file. Let them try to put me in jail. I will go to the press. I will tell them that my daughter is a predator who stole her parents' retirement. I will ruin her reputation before I spend a day in a cell. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a desperate, manic hope. You care about your precious Forbes reputation, don't you? Tatum, he sneered, you think you are untouchable, but if I go down, I am dragging your stock price down with me. I will paint you as the villain of the century. I watched him. It was pathetic. He was holding a grenade without a pin, threatening to drop it at his own feet just to singe my eyebrows. Trent was sitting next to him. My brother was sweating profusely. He was looking back and forth between the $250,000 check that was sitting on the center of the table and his father's red face. Dad, stop, Trent whispered. Shut up. Trent, Randall snapped. We are fighting this. I am not fighting this, Trent said, his voice cracking. Trent stood up. He walked around the table to where the notary was sitting. I am the vice president of operations, Trent said, his hands shaking. My signature is required on the corporate resolution to dissolve the board. He picked up the pen. Trent Randall roared. If you sign that, you are out of the will. There is nothing in the will. Dad. Trent yelled back. There is nothing left. It is all debt. I want my exit money. I want to go home. Trent signed the document. He signed it 3 times, pressing down so hard that the tip of the pen almost tore the paper. He looked at me. Can I go? Go? I said. Trent grabbed his coat and walked out of the room without looking back at his father. He was a rat. Yes, but at least he was a rat with survival instincts. That left Randall, Claudine, and Harlan. Harlan was reading the fine print of the deed. He looked up at me. You locked down the non-disparagement clause tight, Harlan observed. If we say a word, we lose the money, you lose the money, and you get sued for the return of the consulting fees you took from the stolen escrow funds. I reminded him. Harlan nodded. He respected the trap. He took the pen from the notary and signed his name with a flourish. Good game, Tatum, Harlan said. He stood up and left the room. Now it was just my parents. Claudine was crying again. It seemed to be her only setting these days. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. Tatum, please, she sobbed. Is this really how it ends? With lawyers and threats? Can't we just start over? Can't you give us a chance to make it right? We are your family. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had watched me struggle for years and called it a phase. I looked at the woman who had called a reporter to accuse me of elder abuse just 48 hours ago. I gave you a chance when I invited you to the award ceremony, I said softly. I gave you a chance when I answered the phone. I gave you a chance every time I didn't expose Dad's forgery for the last 7 years. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Richmond skyline. Opportunities were meant for people who grow. Mom, I said, not turning around, not for people who feed. You have had my entire life to be a mother. You chose to be a bystander. Randall was still breathing heavily. He was cornered. He had no allies left. I will still destroy you in the press, Randall muttered. Anonymous tips, leaks. I will make sure the world knows you are cold. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification I had been waiting for. I took the phone out and looked at the screen. I turned to face my father. You might want to check the news. Dad, I said. What? He snapped. Forbes just updated the article. I said. Randall frowned. He pulled his phone out of his pocket with clumsy fingers. He tapped the screen. I watched his eyes scan the headline. Tatum Clark, the founder who saved her family's legacy. He froze, read the first paragraph. I said. Randall read it, his lips moving silently. In a surprising move, fintech unicorn Tatum Clark has stepped in to restructure the debt of Vaughn Heritage Lodging. preventing a bankruptcy that would have cost dozens of local jobs. Sources confirm that Clark used personal capital to settle outstanding liens and wages, ensuring the historic business remained solvent under new management. He looked up at me, confusion warring with anger. "They are praising you," he whispered. "I sent them the documentation." I said, "I showed them the payroll records I paid. I showed them the liens I settled. I didn't tell them you were a criminal. I told them you were retiring and that I was ensuring a smooth transition." I walked back to the table and leaned down, bringing my face level with his. "I control the narrative now. Dad, I am not the villain who stole the company. I am the savior who cleaned up your mess. If you try to leak a scandal now, you won't look like a victim. You will look like a bitter, incompetent old man attacking the daughter who saved him from ruin." Randall dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table. He had lost. He had lost the business. He had lost the money. And now, he had lost the power to hurt me. "Sign the papers," I said. "Take the check, and go to Florida." Randall picked up the pen. He looked at the document for a long time. Then, with a defeated sigh that sounded like the air leaving a tire, he signed. Claudine signed next to him, her tears spotting the paper. "It is done," Iris said, gathering the documents. "The transfer is complete. Juniper Ridge Capital is the sole owner of the assets." I picked up the check for $250,000. I held it out to Randall. He took it. He didn't say thank you. He didn't look at me. He just stood up, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "Come on." "Claudine," he muttered. They walked to the door. Claudine paused, looking back at me one last time. "We love you." "Tatum," she whispered. I looked at her. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was distant, like a memory of a pain I used to have. "I know you think you do," I said. They left. The door clicked shut. I sat down in the empty chair. The silence was absolute. Iris put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "I am free," I said. We spent the rest of the afternoon handling the logistics. We met with the new management team. We set up the direct deposit for the employees. By 5 o'clock, the crisis was over. I was in the back of a town car, heading to the airport, when my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Bryce. "Hey Tate, I saw the news. You look like a hero. Listen, I know I messed up, but I really want to learn from you. Can we grab coffee before you fly out? I can drive to the airport." I looked at the message. Bryce, still trying to find an angle, still trying to hustle his way into a room he hadn't earned the right to enter. I forwarded the text to Iris. "File this," I wrote. "Do not reply." Then, another message came through. It was from Randall. I hesitated. I had the restraining order. He shouldn't be texting me. But I knew this was the last time, the final echo. I opened it. "You won. You got the company. You got the praise. But ask yourself this. Tatum, are you happy you cut out your own blood for a business deal? Are you really abandoning your family?" I stared at the screen. The manipulative guilt. The refusal to take responsibility. Even at the end, he was trying to plant a seed of doubt, trying to make me feel like the one who had walked away. I thought about the empty seats at the award ceremony. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about the recording where he promised to destroy me with a smile. I typed my reply. My thumb moved steadily, without a tremor. I was left behind long ago. Today I just stopped looking back. I hit send, then I blocked the number. I leaned back in the seat. I watched the Virginia landscape roll by outside the window, the trees, the old buildings, the history I was leaving behind. I picked up my phone one last time and dialed Sloan. She answered on the first ring. "Status," Sloan asked. "The deal is closed," I said. "The keys are with the new team. The checks have cleared. And the family?" Sloan asked. "Retired." I said. "Permanently." There was a pause on the line. Then I heard the smile in Sloan's voice. "So, what is the play, boss?" I looked out at the runway lights appearing in the distance. The plane that would take me back to Austin, back to my company, back to the life I had built with my own hands. "Get the engineering team ready," I said. We ship the product update tomorrow morning. I hung up the phone. I took a deep breath. The air in the car was cool and recycled. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. It smelled like the future. I was Tatum Clark. I was the founder of the year. And for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Tatum, but sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your office, your car, or maybe while working on your own empire? Drop a comment below and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed this story of justice and reclaiming your power, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to hear that it is okay to choose yourself. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.